Good evening and welcome to TV47 Weekend Edition. So tonight on Her Say, we shine light on Wendy Gonzalez, that is the CEO of SAMA, an organization that is leading the way in ethical AI. SAMA is renowned for its commitment to providing work opportunities in unprivileged or underprivileged communities and as well for vulnerable individuals, and while ensuring the development of artificial intelligence that profits everyone. So under Wendy's leadership, we have evidently seen that SAMA has grown the landscape of impact sourcing and AI data labeling, of course, making a significant difference, not just in technology, but in human lives. That is, of course, in particular for women. And her story, you must wait to hear. So shortly after the news, we'll be looking at that. It's always good to have you joining us. My name is Linda Alela. We have so much lined up for you. Aside from that, we also have Sheila Chelangat, who is on standby still in Nyeri to give us updates. I am told that as of now, we still have the bodies that have been identified from this other end and the students that have lost their lives being at number 21. Of course, we'll be speaking to Sheila later on. We get to hear what updates she has from that end. But of course, lined up for you so much more that is in the world of news, and here are the highlights. On TV47 Weekend Edition, parents of students from Hillside and Russia who are still unaccounted for remain in a state of shock as the process of identifying the remains of the deceased is expected to begin on Monday.
Bado hali ni gumu tu juu iko gumu tu.
And questions have emerged regarding the implementation of safety measures in boarding schools following Friday's devastating fire at Hillside and Arusha School. This as the government orders a thorough inspection of infrastructure in both public and private schools.
To ensure that the safety of our children in boarding schools and even in classes is assured.
Also tonight, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has dismissed isolation claims in the wake of opposition leader Raila Odinga's dalliance with President William Ruto to form the broad-based government. What do analysts say?
Hata kukija kamia gani, mimi ni chuma ya zamani, niko huko ndani. I'm inside.
All right, 22047 is the SMS short code, and of course the hashtag is Her Say at Linda_Alela. I'll be sampling some of your comments as we continue with the broadcast, even as we await that important conversation. But as we get to news, let's remember that our sign language interpreter is none other than Catherine Simeloi on the other end. And we'll go straight to it, where parents and guardians of students still missing from the fire tragedy at the Hillside and Arusha Primary School are in distress, and as they are yet to receive concise information on whereabouts of their sons. And meanwhile, the identification process for those who perished is set to begin on Monday. This is Sheila Chelangat details.
Desperation and frustration was palpable today here at Hillside and Arusha Primary. With more than 24 hours after the horrific tragedy, parents whose children's whereabouts remain uncertain are in distress. Francis is looking for his brother, a grade 6 student, whom he says had only spent a night at the school before the tragic twist of events.
Walifungua shule siku moja, amelala tu shule siku moja, tuliachana na yeye juzi. So kusikia ati amelala tu shule siku moja, siku hii ingine hapatikani, ni jambo la huzuni sana hata katika moyoni mwetu. Tunajaribu kung'ang'ana tu, lakini hali tunapambana tu na hiyo hali.
Mimi naona mbaya kutoka siku hiyo. Hii shule hatuambii ni watoto gani wako hospitali na wanajua. Ndio tujue kama watoto wetu wako hospitali ama wamekufa. Sasa ni siku ya 3.
At the school today, access to it was denied as Directorate of Criminal Investigations officers and government pathologists took over for a scientific analysis of the scene in an attempt to find the root cause of the tragedy. The families calling for expedited investigation and an end to their misery.
Bado hali ni gumu tu juu iko gumu tu. Unajua sasa katoto kama ako una karida unakareta hapa shule, wewe ndio hata kama Mungu wako, lakini kuna effort ya kukainua.
Ni nini? Heri tugiambio ni nini, tuvumilie. Kwa sababu mtu akijua vile inaenda, unavumilia, unalia, alafu unavumilia, unaamini.
For now, the death toll stands at 18, with 70 students yet to be accounted for, even as the identification process of those who perished is set to begin on Monday.
So we have figures, but they are provisional, and we don't want to release them because we need to really confirm. It's really a difficult process because we have to match whatever we are finding on the ground with the particulars. And allow me to leave it at that. So that requires some time.
This school remains cordoned off as a crime scene as investigations hit the final stages. Meanwhile, residents and parents continue to wait on President William Ruto's promise of answering the tough questions into how this tragedy occurred. Sheila Chelangat for TV47 at the Hillside Endarasha Primary School in Nyeri County.
Still on that, Pope Francis has extended his heartfelt condolences to the families of the pupils who tragically lost their lives in a fire at Hillside Endarasha Academy, Nyeri County. And in a telegram addressed to Nyeri Archbishop Anthony Muheria, the Pope expressed his profound sorrow upon hearing of the young lives lost. And His Holiness Pope Francis was deeply saddened to be informed of the loss of young life, and of course expresses his spiritual closeness to all who are suffering the effects of this calamity, especially the injured and the families who grieve. Well, the telegram to Archbishop Muheria by Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin reads, he entrusted the souls of the deceased to the loving mercy of Almighty God and assured his prayers for the personnel and the civil authorities who continue to offer assistance in the aftermath of the tragedy. All right, a Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Mary Muthoni, earlier today issued a statement on the status of Mpox in the country. She said that 2 of the patients who were diagnosed with Mpox have been treated and discharged, while there are 3 more patients who are still in hospital, and that caregivers are looking forward to see them recover and go back to their families. She added that they have enhanced their surveillance and screening the country's ports of entry because they want to ensure that the spread of Mpox is so minimal and does not spread quickly. And so she also advised people to protect themselves from the disease.
Have 2 who already have been treated and discharged. We still have the 3 who are in hospital, and we are looking forward to see them healed and go back to their families. We have enhanced our surveillance and screening at the ports of entry, and that is why that's what we have done to ensure that the spread of this disease does not get to move so quickly. We are also advising people that it is important to protect yourself. Stay away from somebody who has signs and symptoms of Mpox. Ensure you do not share clothes or items like bathing towels, ensure you are able to clean your hands and keep yourself clean at all times.
Still on matters health, and the stakeholders of the health sector from NEFAC and NASCOP have raised an alarm over the worrying trends whereby some people living with HIV, especially the men, have since failed to turn up for HIV testing and treatment, a situation that could lead to a rise in advanced HIV disease in the country. Our reporter Elizabeth Atieno now reports.
There are 1.37 million people living with HIV in Kenya. And now there are concerns on treatment interruptions among some of the people living with HIV who are not strictly adhering to treatment, a situation that will lead to a surge in cases of advanced HIV disease or AHD.
When we talk about advanced HIV disease, we currently see trends that we were seeing a long time ago coming back. The fact that we have treatment which is free and the fact that we have testing which is free, we are seeing people who are not taking up that testing, delaying that testing, and testing when it is very late, particularly men.
The World Health Organization defines advanced HIV disease as CD4 cell count of less than 200 cells per cubic millimeters, or WHO stage 3 or 4 in adults and adolescents. All infected children younger than 5 years of age are considered to have advanced HIV disease.
For children, that may be a different case because children really, before even they have that HIV, they are immunosuppressed and the body is still weak. So the moment they have HIV, they have a different categorizing.
Late diagnosis, especially among the male gender, late engagement to care among people living with HIV, and treatment interruptions have been cited as the leading causes of advanced HIV disease.
So we know that we have had all kinds of reasons, including treatment fatigue. People have been in treatment for too long. Sometimes they feel like, do I need to continue taking my medications?
Currently, the Ministry of Health, through NASCOP and NEFAC, has leveraged on technology to address this concern.
Including what we call machine learning from our systems to try to see what are the characteristics of the person who's likely to interrupt treatment and what can we be able to do to stop them or to support them not to interrupt treatment.
The most common causes of severe illness and death among persons living with HIV include tuberculosis, severe bacterial infections, and cryptococcal meningitis.
When you are on treatment and you interrupt that treatment, then certain opportunistic infections again come.
Once we screen you and we find that you don't have TB, we put you on what we call TB preventive therapy, which is medication that is taken between 3 to 6 months to help you to prevent TB.
In 2022 alone, 22,154 new infections were reported and 18,473 deaths were also reported in the same year. The National AIDS and STIs Control Program, NASCOP, is sensitizing healthcare workers to be able to identify and diagnose advanced HIV disease as well as manage infections that may arise.
One is to make sure that people are there to their treatment so they're not coming to the level of having advanced HIV.
On its part, the National Empowerment Network for People Living with HIV and AIDS in Kenya, NEFAC, has invested in community sensitization campaigns to ensure more people living with HIV strictly adhere to treatment. Elizabeth Atieno, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Liz, for that. Now, Attorney General Dorcas Oduor has been warned against using public resources to defend perpetrators of human rights violation during the Gen Z protests at the East African Court of Justice in Arusha. Speaking during a prayer session held in honor of victims, witnesses and petitioners of the ongoing case filed in Arusha, Bunge la Mwananchi leadership, led by President Frank Awino, expressed confidence that the case will go in their favor.
Thank you.
Bunge la Mwananchi imefaili hiyo koti katika East African Court of Justice. Na inafaa serikali Kenya alikuwa served kwamba serikali ya Kenya iende kujibu hiyo mashtaka katika East African Court of Justice. Ndio kwa sababu hiyo mambo Bunge la Mwananchi imepeleka katika East African Court of Justice. Na jambo tunaomba yale petition wameweka kule East African Court of Justice, wana majeshi ipate kibali. Tazama ni vijana wadogo wenye maono, wenye nguvu, ambao hawajachanganyikiwa, ambao wako na Kristo Yesu. Bwana, ninakushukuru jioni ya siku hii ya leo. Bwana wa majeshi, wewe ndiwe uliyetuita kuwa makuhani.
All right. Tonight, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has dismissed isolation claims in the wake of opposition leader Raila Odinga's dalliance with President William Ruto to form the broad-based government. This despite political pundits arguing that Ruto-Raila bromance will then cement Gachagua's isolation plan. And the Deputy President maintains that he is one of the key architects of the Kenya Kwanza administration and cannot quit, as Apollo Kamau details.
Our former Prime Minister.
On a week, President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga made a joint trip to Beijing, China, to campaign for Odinga's African Union Commission chairmanship seat. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has been quick to dismiss the isolation talk in the government, despite history proving him wrong.
Bwana Rigiji, sisi tumeacha kwa matana hao wenzetu, lakini wewe pia uchunge wao wenzetu, wakiingia kule kama ngamia wataingia na kutoa wengine huko.
Hata kukija ngamia gani, mimi ni chuma ya zamani, niko huko ndani. I'm inside. Hii serikali sinilipigania. There is no way I can move even an inch. Hakuna nafasi ya kusoga hata inchi moja. Wale rais ameleta, tumewakaribisha tufanye kazi pamoja for one country. And the coming of the people who have come cannot displace the ones who are there.
President Ruto appears to have cemented his dalliance with Odinga during last week's successful tour of the Nyanza region, where the president and Odinga's allies said Kenya Kwanza and ODM will form an alliance in the 2027 polls.
Najisikia serikali vile niko ndani. Na nataka kusema hapa si haya. Sina nia ya kutoka kamwe. Si leo, si kesho kutwa, si mtandagao, si mwezi ujao, si mwaka ujao, si muhula ujao.
Hiyo uongozi ya upinzani baada ya miaka mitatu, hiyo kiongozi ya upinzani tutatafutia watu wengine, kwa sababu sisi wote tutakuwa tuko upande wa serikali.
History might prove Gachagua wrong if he will not defy Kenya's political curse of being an isolated second in command, unlike President Ruto, who turned his misfortunes into victory in the August 2022 general election.
I see every effort to alienate Rigathi Gachagua from the formation, and part of it is of his own making. He didn't pick up any lessons from Ruto and Uhuru. He arrived and continued behaving the same way Ruto had behaved, as if he was another center of power in government, only that Ruto was a little more guarded than himself.
In the Mount Kenya region, Gachagua appears to have silenced his critics, save for his staunch opponent Kikuyu MP Kimani Ichung'wah and a section of MPs opposed to what they call tribal leadership.
Sisi hapa Mount Kenya region, viongozi ambao sisi tulichagua kama Wanjiku wanataka kumdhalilisha deputy president wetu. Niseme ya kwamba wako na tarehe na Wanjiku wa Mount Kenya region.
Kodele ni nyinyi.
Gachagua surprised critics and allies on his warm reception in Odinga's backyard of Nyanza, a region that was hostile to him, for terming Kenya Kwanza as a shareholder government, meaning those who voted President William Ruto to power. Apollo Kamau, TV47.
Thank you, Apollo, for that. Away from it, we still come back to the cases of fire erupting in schools, and we have the latest coming from Isiolo, where Isiolo girls, one of the dormitories, is, of course, caught fire this evening, and we are told that indeed rescue activities ongoing. Of course, this coming from the Red Cross Society announcing that they dispatched the rescue teams, that is to the scene, to ensure that the fire is contained. And of course, we'll be checking to see the updates that come from that end to give you more, of course, saying or arguing, or perhaps the reports they're getting to us that property of unknown value has been destroyed or has been destroyed, yes. And of course, this is a Saturday evening after that very incident at Isiolo Girls High School. And this indeed has caused panic among parents and guardians, even as, of course, the locals rushed to ensure that they would come in to give the rescue activities, that is to the students and as well the property. As you can evidently see, that is on your screens, but Red Cross on ground to ensure that this then is contained so that then we reduce the cases of panic. So we'll be giving you more updates on the same as and when they get to hit the desk. Of course, this coming barely a day after what played out in Russia. And as I have said, we have Sheila Chelangat on ground. That is at the Hillside and Russia Academy in Nyeri as well, gathering the updates of the very same occurrence so that you are all updated from this. And the police spokesperson as well weighing into this matter of the fire in Isiolo, saying that the fire has so far been contained. And we'll be looking at that later on, but we continue with more. That is on news. And the family in Kayole, Soweto is crying for justice after their kin was allegedly murdered in cold blood. Anne Wanjiku Nganga was allegedly murdered by a man in a house where she had gone to collect house rent arrears, as Samira Mohammed details.
Family of a middle-aged woman is seeking justice after their kin was allegedly murdered in cold blood in a house belonging to her father.
Alikuwa tu amevalishwa karatasi na kigunia uso, huku alikuwa uchi.
Anne Wanjiku Nganga was allegedly murdered by an officer from one of the disciplined forces in the country in his rented house where she had allegedly gone to collect house arrears.
Alikuwa alipanda huko, walikuwa wamemwambia aende pesa kwa sababu akikuja hapa aliniambia bwana ameadmit amelipwa pesa iko, lakini bibi hataki kutoa pesa. Bibi amekatalia pesa apande juu waongee. Hiyo ndio aliniambia ya mwisho.
Aliweza kupatana na kifo yake na mtu mmoja pale ambaye inaaminika kabisa alikuwa mwanajeshi ambaye amekuwa tenants, maana my sister yeye mwenyewe alikuwa ni caretaker wa hiyo nyumba ambayo ni ya baba yetu.
It is alleged that the man called Anne to his house to clear his house arrears but took her life on arrival and later hung her body in a toilet using a bedsheet.
Kasemekana ni kama walikuwa wamemkopa pesa karibu 30,000. So ni kama alikuwa amemwambia atarudisha siku fulani. Na ikaonekana pia ako na rent arrears ya miezi mbili, that is 16,000.
Mwili ilikuwa imehangiwa katika siri. Kuna zile mbao juu, ni nyumba ya mwisho juu. Kuna zile mbao ambao alikuwa amezingoa ndio aweze kuassess mbao ambazo zimejenga nyumba. So alikuwa amefunga vitambaa kwa zile mbao. So mwili ilikuwa imehang tu ndani ya choo, ambaye alikuwa amefungwa shingo na alikuwa amefungwa kwa miguu.
Police officers who spoke to TV47 say they had launched a manhunt for the alleged killer who is currently on the run.
Mwanajeshi ashikwe ndio tujue what happened, mpaka akafika mahali akachukua uhai wa Shiko.
Samira Mohammed for TV47.
Sports news brought to you by Maybet. Bet bila stake. Predict the outcome of 8 pre-selected games and win up to 100,000 shillings. Only at maybet.com.
And we now get sporty, where the national soccer team Harambe Stars have touched down in South Africa ahead of their clash against Namibia in the AFCON qualifiers. Stars will lock horns with Namibia on Tuesday at the Orlando Stadium after playing to a goalless draw against Zimbabwe in the opening fixture. Well, head coach Engin Firat, however, remains optimistic that his side can still make it for the continental showpiece scheduled for next year in Morocco.
It's simple to explain. In the last match, he scored 3 goals against Zimbabwe. So we couldn't close this. Michael is a special player. So that's the reality. So like I said, for me it's counting very simple. For us now, it's this moment 0-0 is not the result we wanted. We wanted to win. But the reality in this group is only Cameroon has home matches. All other teams have no home match. So this means every match have a new history. This means in every match you can get 3 points. So therefore, like I said from beginning, it is for us important on the last day to go through the group. And there's nothing changed in our thoughts about it.
And former Gor Mahia player Sammy Owino, commonly known as Kempes or Kemps, has declared himself as a presidential aspirant for the forthcoming Kenya Football Federation elections. Speaking during the lounge that was held in one of the hotels in Nairobi, that is, Sammy claimed that he is the most qualified aspirant amongst all other candidates, and further went on to promise that he would bring the end to the crisis in Kenyan football if elected to be the next president. Meanwhile, a former Harambe Stars head coach, that is Jacob Gosmulei, and former Harambe Stars midfielder Sami Shulei also backed, of course, Sami's as the most qualified candidate for the position if elected as the president.
I honestly believe that there's a lot of hope for football in this country, and I believe that if I'm elected to serve, that we can revive football in this country and take it to heights that we will make it one of the top football nations in Africa.
At 13 years, I was jumping City Stadium to watch this guy, Kempes, when we play for Gor Mahia. At 13 years, I wanted to be the Harambe Stars coach, and my mentor then, Oti Father, was taking me to Harambe Stars camp in Jacaranda Hotel. Sammy Kempes was one of those players.
With Hussein Mohamed, I've worked with Nick Mwendwa. I have worked with Sam Nyamwea. And now Sammy Owino Kempes. I met Sammy Owino Kempes a year before last year, and I sat down with him, and we discussed a lot of, football, Kenya football matters, and I thought he had some.
The third edition of the Nairobi City Marathon is expected to happen tomorrow, with 80% of the marathon set to happen at the Nairobi Expressway. The race is expected to kickstart at Nyayo Stadium, with a statement on the Nairobi City Marathon indicating that different roads across the city will be closed at diverse times of the day. Speaking today, the CEO of the Nairobi City Marathon, Barnaba Korir, assured participants that the preparations are already complete, with the winners of the different events expected to be awarded medals and cash prizes.
The first prize money for men and women is 3,500,000, and then of course that's number 1, and it goes deep up to number 20. That is the marathon, and that, the last one, which is 20 in the marathon for both men and women, is 30,000. So 3.5 million number 1, number 20, 30,000 men and women. Because anybody who is going to run must be given something to go home with. And of course, we have also electronic timing machine, which ensures that every individual that runs will be, their performance and their timings will be captured, and everybody's name will also be captured to ensure that anyone who runs, they will always find their name in the record books of the third Nairobi City Marathons.
All right, and that's the match that we had. That is in the world of news. But shortly on her say, like I had earlier mentioned, we'll be speaking to Wendy Gonzalez, who's the CEO of SAMA. and of course a trailblazer in the world of ethical AI. We have seen just how much Sama has done in terms of dedicating its job to creating opportunities for the underprivileged communities and of course supporting the vulnerable individuals. In this case then of course we'll also be looking at women and her say being largely about women. We speak to the CEO, who then of course has significantly shaped the field of impact sourcing and AI data labeling that is at this level of summer. So as we cross over to that very important conversation, I ask that you stay tuned as well as we release our sign language interpreter, that is Catherine C. Malloy at this very point. The hashtag as always is her say. We'll be looking at some of your comments as we continue with the broadcast, but then that's after this break.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
You're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia
Welcome back to the broadcast. And as earlier mentioned, the CEO of SAMA, Wendy Gonzalez, is with us this evening. The conversation revolving around the evolution of AI and just how it is looping in the world, that is to enjoy the successes of it. And of course, as we get to these conversations, basically we as well get to understand how she finds her way here. In a bit of making sure that at least you as the girl out there is empowered with her story. Of course, the lines are open for you to interact with us. As always, the hashtag is her say. We'll be looking at some of your comments as we continue with the broadcast. Thank you so much, ma'am, for creating time to be here with us.
Pleasure to be here, Linda.
All right, and we go straight to it. Summer, just what about it before we get deep into the conversation?
Absolutely. SAMA, we are an AI technology company. So we help some of the world's largest companies build their AI models, and we do that right here in Nairobi, Kenya.
And beautiful. Just how is the girl involved in this now that you are the CEO? And how, you've worked with them for quite a long time. I was checking up on your profile.
Yes, I've been with SAMA since, for over 9 years now, since early 2015. So at SAMA, we have a social mission. Our goal is to be able to empower women and youth to join the digital economy. So our goal is to provide digital upskilling and then hire people into entry-level jobs so they can get their first job in technology in the formal economy. We have a focus specifically on hiring women, in fact, because I'm sure as you would probably agree, when women succeed, society succeeds.
Right.
They send their children to school, they get involved in the community. So we have a purposeful hiring model where we hire at least 50% women. So right now in our company, we have 53% women in our company, and that is from our entry level all the way up through our management levels.
Beautiful. So why this kind of bias, in as much as the world is saying that, well, let us proceed to empower the girl child, let us push to ensure that we have a 50-50 representation across. I mean, one would want to argue that it can be quite a difficult thing to achieve, especially understanding that maybe the girl child is not so much so engraved in technology.
Well, that's the beauty of this model. So really from a social mission standpoint, we want to reduce the barriers to employment. So jobs in the digital economy are plentiful, right? There's a lot of demand for entry-level technical skill sets. And so in our hiring model, we do not expect people to have computer science degrees. We actually hire on the basis of impact. So you don't need to have a degree in technology. We provide the digital upskilling, so we train people, and we want to ensure that there's equal footing for both men and women. So hence our focus is that oftentimes women face a lot of barriers to employment, in particular in technology. I've definitely seen it in my career as well.
All right, beautiful. Speaking of your career, a bit of your story and how you find your way here.
Well, I started by going to university, so I feel thankful. My parents, I have two older brothers, but they have the same expectation of me. Like, you're going to go to college, and get a job just like everybody else did. And I started my career in accounting and information systems, but I found fairly quickly, I joined Ernst & Young. They're a large global accounting and audit firm, and I found very quickly that I liked technology better, actually. So I transitioned from auditing into the management consulting group, where I started to basically deploy the latest technologies for, Fortune 500 companies across the globe, and that's what really spawned my interest. So from there, I went to two public companies to join in IT leadership roles. I loved it so much, I wanted to found my own company. So I founded an Internet of Things startup. And then from there, I joined SAMA, where this idea that we could bring technology to a whole new population, in particular women and youth in underserved communities, was something I felt really passionate about.
All right, and so here we are. You are actually doing it. Let us acknowledge that AI has been in existence for the longest of time. Just that in this time and age is when we get to feel it, firsthand, and we get to enjoy the benefits of it. But therein lies some element of skepticism. as to, the goodness of it. Sometimes we want to ask ourselves whether it's really the best thing, especially when it comes to education. And our students here, I will tell you, will always so much run into AI and sometimes not put so much of their mind into reading and all that. What would you say and the world needs to do to create a balance such that, we get to benefit, but equally address the concerns that come along with AI?
Oh, absolutely. That's such a great point. So one of the things that's really critical, you're absolutely right. I mean, AI, artificial intelligence, has actually been around for multiple decades, right? It's basically this process of leveraging data and predicting outcomes and patterns using computers, basically. And the key, now that technology has advanced so quickly, I mean, I think you mentioned this earlier in your introduction, the adoption of the technology is happening at a record pace. We'll talk a little bit about generative AI as well, which is happening so quickly. But the key in building effective AI systems is being able to, number one, make sure they're explainable. To exactly your point, if you don't expose and aren't transparent about what is your AI doing, how did you build it, what kind of data sets did you use to ensure that it's going to be accurate and bias-free, it's very difficult for the public to trust it. So there are best practices in ensuring not only are you defining what you're building in AI, the data sources you're using, and then the other components, which is actually where Sama comes in, is the human validation. When this machine is predicting an outcome or generating new content, you need humans to help validate that it's actually working as it's expected to.
Is it not going to take the place of the human as time goes by? We are always scared when we're actually thinking that there's going to be some AI, something that has been set up, and of course they're going to take up the places of the human element in terms of, workspaces. You wake up and there's an anchor which is not a human being and all that. So how do we address that fear?
Well, I think it's really important that we think about how AI is developed. So there's some pretty interesting things that are happening. I know there's some AI work, policy work that's happening here in Kenya. You might have seen some of the work happening in Europe and the US as well, which basically says AI needs to be developed for the good of humanity.
Right.
It's not intended to replace humanity, but for the good of humanity. So it means when AI systems are being built, they need to not only keep in mind how do they affect humanity in a positive way, but that they are not creating a huge amount of displacement. It's really about how humans will work with AI, not how humans will get replaced with AI.
Is that what is happening?
Well, I think that there are some things that are being automated. I think it's very fair to say that we won't be doing things manually forever.
Right.
And I'll kind of give you an example of technology. So many years ago, there was a lawsuit from the Porters Union against suitcase manufacturers. So you know why they were suing was because suitcase manufacturers started building roller bags.
Okay.
And so they protested and said, well, who's going to carry the bags now? Now that you have this new technology to roll these bags. And it's like, well, technology is going to shift. It's going to change, right? And so we can embrace what that change is and move along with it and figure out how humans can move up the value chain, do creative work, other things, and how we can drive value out of AI. So I think it's much better for us to look at how do we adopt it in a really fair and ethical way, as opposed to kind of ignoring that it exists. So there are some really good applications, and actually here, for example, in Kenya, one of the largest industries is agriculture, right? So it represents almost 22%, I think, of the GDP and the jobs. Well, imagine, when there is food scarcity and famine, imagine if you can leverage AI technology to help reduce crop disease and increase crop yield. So it's not about replacing what the farmers do, it's about how can we make those farmers more productive. So there are all sorts of ways in which AI can be leveraged for the betterment of humanity, and that's really how responsible AI should be developed.
Beautiful. You speak about adaptation, and I think one then wants to understand some more in relation to just how the rest of the world is adapting to this. I acknowledge the fact that it could be relative across. How would you rate Africa and Kenya in particular in terms of just adapting to this?
It's a great question. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, and certainly if I had my say, we would be creating so many jobs here in Kenya from the AI industry. So I think there are a couple of key things. One is how can we build AI here in Kenya that is going to be impactful? So I'll touch again maybe on agriculture a little bit, where you can build AI that is going to specifically benefit Kenya. So at Samwi, we work with some companies, both abroad and here in Kenya, that are building some amazing technologies. So they're leveraging satellites. So satellites to evaluate entire fields of crops. And from those satellites, they're using computer vision AI to identify where weeds are. So normally, right, is that people have to deploy pesticides everywhere, right? It's very costly. It's not very good for the environment, right? Because there's a lot of chemicals in them. Well, what if you had a technology that told you exactly where to apply the pesticide? So you can use this aerial footage to identify where the weeds are, and then the farmer can apply pesticides in only that area. And what that does is that increases crop yield, right? Because you're not putting pesticides across everything, you're allowing the healthy plants to grow, and you're reducing the farmer's costs. So that's an example of some technology that we're building. Another example is farmers sell their commodities, right, on the market. Well, there are now some great startups in Kenya that are using AI, so you can take your phone, right, take a picture of your crops, identify, okay, this is how much I've yielded, load that up directly into a commodities market to sell your goods directly. Right? So there are so many ways in which AI can be leveraged to not only actually be built here, but also to benefit the citizens of Kenya as well.
Well, let's talk about e-learning and education and what you make of it. And like I have told you, sometimes our students sit pretty, knowing very well that, you know, there are elements like the ChatGPT where, you know, during the examinations they will go there and somehow they're going to find solutions to, you know, these critical things. And therefore this sort of like discourages them from focusing much on education and bringing out the best of them. How do we, again, create a balance on this such that they get to benefit of what this AI brings, but at the same time, they indeed benefit in the sense that they get, you know, concrete elements of education?
Yeah, I have kids myself, and that's one of the first things I say is don't go to one of those generated by models to do your homework, things like that. But I think the key for kids are a couple of things. One is this can be a very powerful tool to help make sure to help students become more productive, right? So imagine having an AI that allows you to gather all this information and synthesize this data. It actually can be quite powerful, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to have the context and understanding of what to do with that. So I think the key thing for education, first of all, is all the core fundamentals of how to do, you know, deductive reasoning, critical thinking, all those things absolutely apply. Whether you have a tool or not, doesn't mean you don't have to have that curiosity and to learn how things are made and built.
Right.
The key will really be about how can you leverage those tools to help make you, a little bit more efficient, to help drive some of that sort of data and insights. Then the second component is that the key is about being able to build AI here, right here in Kenya. So I'm a huge proponent of STEM education. I think it's incredibly important that we start learning computers, from primary school all the way up through secondary and high school. And one of the things that we're doing most recently is we've developed a partnership with the University of Nairobi to basically drive focus in AI. So actually this week I'll be doing a lecture in conjunction with I think the Vice Chancellor to really share about how AI and real world applications of AI can be done here in Kenya. So I think it's incredibly important is not only do we learn more in STEM and computer science to actually build the AI here so that Kenyans can not only enjoy the fruits of AI, but actually build it for the Kenyan
audience. And that then tells me that in as much as there's this growth that perhaps would almost appear relative across the global fraternity, there's some essence and importance of making sure that this is local and perhaps identifies to the local elements.
Context is important, right? So a lot of these, you might have heard of general artificial intelligence. These are these large models that can kind of do anything. Like it's now embedded in our search engines and things of that nature, which is great. So you need quite a bit of amount of data and human validation to ensure those models are working correctly. But what if you wanted to build a model in Swahili? What if you wanted to build? I was talking to somebody earlier. The crops of wheat here in Kenya look a little bit different than, say, the ones in Russia, right? So if you're leveraging Russian machinery and it's been built off of a different data set in Russia, well, how's that going to work when it comes here to the crops in Kenya?
Sure.
So there's absolutely, I think, a huge benefit to local data sets, the local context as well.
All right, as you highlight some of the challenges of getting to have this penetrate and in a good way, then one would want to understand, we still have, at least in the country, a concern or questions lingering as to how we can as well manage data infrastructure, because that's a huge concern. What are some of the challenges that you have encountered as SAMA, perhaps in trying to make sure that, well, people embrace this element of digitalization, but at the same time, you know, the difficulties that come along with, you know, the infrastructure deficit?
So I think there are probably 4 key elements towards successful development of AI. So the first one is infrastructure. And I actually think that, Kenya and the investments that have been made over time to build a really strong internet access is a huge part of it. So number one, to be able to develop AI and have access to it, you need to have internet access. There's been a great amount of investment in that infrastructure. The second is you need to have cloud computing, of course, which requires the internet access and GPUs and CPUs, right? Basically the computing power. So that is one thing that from a supply chain standpoint, we need to ensure that we have the right computer equipment to effectively develop the AI. Second component beyond the infrastructure is really related to skill sets. So to be able to effectively develop AI and the best practices of how you build AI, this is where, I mentioned STEM education, computer science, really building the education to support the development of AI becomes really important. So skills are critical, and then certainly it's really having a very clear understanding of where you want to deploy it. So our discussion earlier, which is how can you leverage AI in a positive way to benefit humanity? So AI for good, such as agriculture, medicine. If I can just digress there for a second on another great application. So there are some amazing companies out there now that are building medical technology that allows life-saving distribution of blood, drugs, and medicine to communities in rural areas. So in Rwanda, as an example, there is a company that actually has drones.
Drones, yes.
So those drones, right, they are unmanned, okay, and they have approved flight paths. And what can happen is that what's difficult in rural communities is you may not have access to all the medicine, all the types of blood, right, because they're small communities. And so there can be a hub in a city where a doctor in a rural community just simply puts a chat in a WhatsApp group and says, we've had an accident or an emergency. I need type O blood. I need, this kind of medicine. That chat goes back to the central headquarters. They put the blood and the medicine in a drone. It flies unmanned. It's there, in less than an hour, saving somebody's life, right? So it's a great example of how AI technology can be used to help fly that drone to make sure it lands there safely and saves lives.
All right, we have a bit of that in Kenya, and I hope that we can actually leverage on the same to have it cut across. Kisumu has somehow tried it, but of course, lots of questions as to whether then it can be implemented fully. But that aside, and you talk about just how we get to use AI. But one thing that is important, and I'm sure somewhere along what it is that we have already said, we have perhaps touched on that, but just how crucial is responsible AI, and what exactly do we mean when we refer to it?
It's a great question. So responsible AI is really a framework in which artificial intelligence, or AI, is developed. So it really is composed of a few different components. One is, have you identified that your data, right? So what you're using to build your AI, you have a clear purpose. It's been documented, so explainable, right? So the public can understand what's happening there. And have you used the correct data sets and accurate data sets so that the AI that you're deploying is bias-free, right? It doesn't discriminate. It has all the data it needs to be able to perform correctly. The second is that it needs a quality management system. So once AI is deployed into production, it's out in the market, well, data changes, right? The world moves, things change, and so you need to have a quality management system that assures that you're constantly evaluating the AI to ensure that it works as expected. The third is human-centric validation. So how do you make sure that what's being deployed, even if, in generative AI, AI models are generating new content. You have to ensure that content is factually correct, right? Cannot be manipulated, right? Is accurate and has the right sentiment and tone. So you need that human validation as well. And then certainly, last but not least, you have to clearly document the purpose of that AI so that everybody understands what is it being used for? Because AI and generative AI models, even hair dryers have warning labels, right? They say if you plug it in your water, you could be electrified, right? Well, it's the same kind of thing. You don't want AI to be misused for a purpose, right? So understanding how it's been built, what it should be used for, I think is going to be important. And then also really data privacy. So a lot of times I think when people are leveraging some of these models, they, you say, yep, I accept and agree, agree with all that. But what can be, if you don't read that carefully, is that your data that you're entering could be used to build the AI model. So I think it's going to be very important from an educational standpoint that people understand, hey, if you're using this model, will they be able to use my data? Am I comfortable with that? So privacy and kind of KYC, those kinds of policies are going to need to apply.
I'm sure you've gone in depth to just understand the Data Regulation Act right here in the country and all that. Do you suppose that we have sufficient laws perhaps to address concerns that would arise, in relation to, data flouting processes that would happen? Because then we're also talking about ethical AI. So when we're talking about ethical AI, just do we have, tools that are good enough to ensure that even as we use AI, then of course we are guided by certain laws or we are guided by certain rules?
Absolutely. So, I mean, as far as data protection goes, Kenya's pretty strong. There's a very, a good amount of legislation out there to protect individuals' data privacy. Now, that doesn't mean as a user we shouldn't continue the education, right? Because you might sign up and willingly give your, give your information over. So I think from that standpoint, the policies are pretty strong. But there does need to be a national AI policy that is developed for exactly what you just shared, which is ensuring that AI that's developed is responsible. So by responsible, it means what those different elements of, data governance, quality management, et cetera. Well, the need for those become more important when you're talking about higher risk applications. So by high risk applications, let's talk about something like policing or say financial lending. Imagine if you're in a situation, and you might have heard of this inference bias, but if you're doing a lending application, and if the model is built off of, for example, say existing data, well, what ends up happening if the data set you're pulling from shows that very few women get loans approved? It could infer, right? That women shouldn't get it. So this is what I mean by taking a look and making sure your data sets are proper, you don't have bias, because that would be a terrible situation. Ethical AI really has to do with is your AI potentially biased to be harmful to a certain sector of society, right? Women as an example, so that's one of the components. But the other is, how have you built it? Have you built it in an ethical way? So one of the things that is important to us here at SAMA is that we don't leverage the crowd. We have a full-time employment model. So people are paid both base salary, bonus incentives. They have medical, dental, full benefits, and this allows them to focus on quality. I just want to distinguish that a bit from responsible AI. So responsible AI is really the framework in which you develop AI. Ethical AI really has to do with is your AI potentially biased to be harmful to a certain sector of society, right? Women as an example, so that's one of the components. But the other is, how have you built it? Have you built it in an ethical way? So one of the things that is important to us here at SAMA is that we don't leverage the crowd. We have a full-time employment model. So people are paid both base salary, bonus incentives. They have medical, dental, full benefits, and this allows them to focus on quality. So people aren't rushing through trying to just get the right answer because they get paid by the task, but about being able to create quality. And so that's an example as well of ethical AI, is making sure that not only do you have sort of the chain of custody of the data, but that when it's being developed and the people who are developing it are being treated fairly.
All right, beautiful. So the show is biased. I think I said it's biased to women for a moment, and so
I won't complain.
Yeah. So then, of course, one would want to ask just how friendly is this element of digitization for the girl child. If you're going to look at the country, if we're going to focus much on data, just how much is the girl child appreciating this? How much is the girl child getting so benefit that are aligned to the element of technology and digitization?
Yeah, it's I have a daughter as well, and that's one of the things I'm like telling her every day. I'm like, you are really good at math and science because, especially for the girl child, you get to a certain age where it happens where for some reason girls don't think that they're good at technology.
Right.
And the reality is that the percentage of female engineers is much smaller than the number of male engineers. So I think it starts with, first off the education and really encouraging girls to, that you're good at math, to focus on math and science. But beyond that, specifically at Sama, one of the things that I was really excited about joining this company is that we're not saying you have to have a PhD in computer science to join. We're here to actually help you develop those skills. So we're really an entry-level technical job where you don't have to have any experience. You can come in, do training, learn how to leverage, computers, using a mouse, a keyboard.
The basics,
The basics, Then understanding, well, what is AI? How is it developed? How can it be used? And our whole goal is to basically provide those digital skill sets so that when somebody comes and joins our entry-level position, they get to know about technology, they learn about data and insights, with the idea being that with the skills that they've built, they can go and continue to get another job in the formal economy, should they choose. So there's no barrier, right? And that's one of the reasons why I was really excited. Well, it is a focus to say, hey, we are going to hire at least 50% women. It's creating that access and opportunity where people who may have never thought about technology are thinking about it. In fact, I met a young woman who joined our company a couple of years ago. She was like, I started working in this, doing entry-level annotation for self-driving cars. She's like, I don't just want to annotate. She's like, I want to build the next self-driving car.
Wow.
So she earned enough money. She went to school to get a degree in data science. She's like, I'm not just going to be a consumer of this. I'm going to build it, right?
Beautiful.
And that's the thing that I absolutely love to see.
Digitalization is one element that we can't run away from. But even in the introduction of these in various sectors and areas, there's a bit of resistance. The other day we were talking about just how much AI then is bound to be allowed into the medical sector, like you say, in the country. Something as basic as filling data of say a patient that data that can be accessed across. I think that is happening very well with education in the country. But we have some element of resistance. What will it take for us to soften the hearts of the people, to get the people to understand the importance of this and understand that this is for their own benefits as opposed to something that comes to take away what it is that they already have?
Yeah, we went through something fairly similar in the U.S. a number of years ago as well, when there was a transition to electronic medical records from paper records, and so all of these different regulations and laws were put in place. HIPAA compliance, if the audience may have heard of that, but it's all these security provisions in place to assure that the information that you provide your doctors and goes to medical, other medical professionals is protected.
Right.
So I think number one is this data protection. It becomes a very, very important thing. But the other component of it is really education and awareness. So, many years ago, people thought you had to go to a bank, right? You had to go and you had to see the cash. In fact, some people didn't even use banks. Right? Back when my parents were growing up, you would literally stick your cash in your couch, right? And you would leave it at your house. Well, then banking came along and was like, oh, I can earn interest and my money's protected because there's all these federal, these policies in place to ensure that my money is protected. And then comes along M-Pesa. How revolutionary is that technology to now mean that, wow, as an individual, I don't have to go to a bank and have a formal checking account. I can transfer money, and the amount of productivity that has kind of changed. I can't even imagine that anybody now is like, oh, what was life like when you used to have cash and you used to do this? So I think that between the education and the policies, it's going to be one of those things where I think as people really begin to recognize that this could be a huge productivity enhancer, could actually make life easier. That's when we're really going to see adoption. But it also comes with making sure that people understand, is your data being protected, and the appropriate policies in place to do so.
The largest chunk to make sure that this then is adopted in a responsible way in the country lies with the government. And so in executing this mandate, what do you suppose would be necessary for us to accord, or other entities to come in to accord to the government so that they can valuably, again, get this to the people?
Yeah, I think it really requires a public-private partnership So, you know, the government all has their rules, but they're not necessarily, and I say this obviously very respectfully, experts in every area, right? A lot of times where this technology is being deployed is either in research and education or by the companies who are actually building this technology. And I think what we're finding with AI and generative AI in particular is that where it used to be researchers kind of driving the path forward, now it's companies, right, who are building these models, are really pushing the envelope. So I think a public-private partnership to say, hey, you know, here's how the technology can be deployed, you know, in conjunction with government, who says, hey, how can we establish policies to ensure our citizens are protected and that, you know, AI is for the benefit of humanity. They need to come together so you can get the right experts, and, you know, both in the private sector in conjunction with the government to ensure that there is a healthy balance.
All right, and now that you have highlighted just how different then responsibility would be to ethical AI, then it brings us to another question, the question of regulatory, and I think that's basically what I was asking the other time, the regulatory elements of it. As a country, as Africa, how do we achieve this for the benefit, again, of the people?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's no global standard that's happening right now. So each country is really developing their own stance on it. So, you know, the U.S. has a policy, the European Union has a policy, and now regulation. So does Canada. Kenya needs to develop its own AI policy. So I think there's some activity that's happening now with the government to do that. I think they should do that in conjunction with that private-public partnership. But it really needs to center around the kind of the elements we discussed before, which is, and the EU has a pretty promising framework, but is it being developed on, you know, assessing the risk of the systems that are being built to ensure there's not harm, right? Having the appropriate structures in place around data governance, privacy, you know, human validation, et cetera. So that does need to be a policy, because otherwise AI will be just developed without that warning label that we were talking about earlier. And so if AIs can be developed and then deployed en masse to the country, then part of citizens, right, feeling comfortable and trusting it is going to be, is it explainable? Do we know how it's being developed? Can we have assurances that it's being deployed correctly?
Beautiful. All right, we have to come to a close. Just that first, the CEO of SAMA, Wendy Gonzalez, thank you so much for speaking to us. What would be your parting shots, even as we close this evening?
Anybody can be an AI. This message is to the audience of girls and women. You have an equal shot at getting in there. Highly encourage it. There are going to be more jobs created here in this sector. So please, like, stoke your passion, be curious, and anybody can do it. No barriers.
Yes, you have got to be curious. You have got to come out of that element of fear. You have got to, you know, shed off this mentality that AI technology is for the men. In fact, for the longest of time, we've lived in those shadows of, you know, anything technical in the house is going to be fixed by the men. I think we're running away from that. And of course, like they say, the space is open. So why don't you challenge yourself this evening? My name is Linda Alela. It was great having you. I'm looking forward to have another conversation on Her Say